Welcome back to the channel. We're back in the garage and we're back in the TR6. It's fair to say that after a few years of ownership, it's normally the niggly little things that start to bug you and keep you in the garage for upgrade-itis. One of the things that's bugged me on this car for a little while is here on the temperature gauge. When it's up to temperature, it's just about at the quarter. And let's face it, we all like things to be as they should be, and I'd like my needle slap bang in the middle, pointing upwards, so I know if it's hotter it'll go into the second half, and if it's cold it's in the bottom half. So that got me thinking, I wonder why it is where it is. What can I do to test it? So I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to get this gauge out, we'll get it on the bench, we'll wire it up and see what happens. First thing to do then is to take this gauge out. Luckily, the gauges are held in quite simply with a clamp on the back with the screw that goes through the middle and a small knurled nut that can be undone by hand. So undo the nut, take this off, which connects the gauge to the back of the dash. We're giving it an earth, and at that point it will just pull out. The back of the gauge, we've got two connectors. We take the light out of this connector here. This is where the bracket screws onto, of course, and you've got two wires coming in. You've got two wires coming in onto this spade terminal and one wire coming out on this spade terminal. So let's have a look at the wiring diagram and see where those go. Looking at the wiring diagram, this is quite straightforward. We've got a voltage regulator here, so that's where the power is coming into the back of the gauge here. So with the one with two wires is where the power is coming in. The single wire is going out to the sensor, and that in turn is earthed through the engine. You've the second wire coming off here, goes to the fuel gauge, and similarly that goes to the sender, which is earthed through the body. So I know my fuel gauge is working absolutely perfectly, so that gives me a little bit of confidence in the voltage regulator, so I can focus on testing this gauge and the sensor. So I've got two gauges. I've got the one that's in the car, and I've got this sender unit here, and this gauge is the one out of the car. So I'm going to clean these terminals up, wire this up to a battery, and then through to the sender, and then I'm going to get a cup of hot water and we'll see what happens. So now we're all set up. Here's our little science experiment. Very crude here. We've got the power terminal off a battery wired into the gauge. Off the other side of the gauge we have a wire coming to the top of the sensor, and then from the sensor we're earthed back to the battery. And this is the sensor out of the car. This is a cup of boiling water, so at this stage I expect this to be probably around 85-90 degrees, and there on the gauge we're just under a quarter, which is what it tends to run at. So the question is, how do I get it into the middle? Is it the gauge or is it the sensor? A quick search on Google then has identified that one of the potential tests you can do on these things is put an ohmmeter across the two terminals, and a good gauge should be about 60 ohms. So let's check. So here we go then. Let's put the ohmmeter across the terminals. Well, would you look at that? 60 ohms. Okay, so that gives me confidence in the gauge, which means the sender unit could be suspect. So next stage then is going to be to get myself a sender unit. And again, through the magic of Google, having a look for one with the B730 identifier on it should give me an original gauge, which should work with that. So back in a few days when we've sourced one of these. And by the magic of video, here is a brand new temperature sensor. This one then looking to be one of the aftermarket type sensors. It's got FAE 312, looks like a 10 on it, but marketed as, oh there it's got H38, marketed as a TR6 temperature sensor. So let's rig that up and see what happens. Rigged up again then, we've got positive going into the back of the gauge, out of here to my new temperature sensor, earth back to the battery, and here we have a cup of boiling water, which, so if I just drop that sensor into the cup of boiling water and then I go back over to my gauge, you can see that starting to go up already. Now if you remember my previous temperature sensor, the gauge would have stopped just below or just around the quarter mark. So already this water's been in here probably about 3 or 4 minutes now, so I would suggest it's probably about 85-90 degrees now, maybe a little bit more. And there you can see the temperature sensors landing. You're going to go higher. No, that's landing a little bit above the halfway mark, which is where I would expect it to be for water that would be around the 90-degree mark. So certainly this temperature sensor giving a far better result than the previous one. So I'm going to get this back in the car, start it up, get it up to temperature and see where my gauge is. Temperature then, and the gauge is sitting just above the quarter mark, on its way to the halfway mark, but still not quite where I'd like it to be. I think it should be sitting in the middle, so a little bit more investigation to work to do. So next thing I'm going to do is have a look at the thermostat and see what thermostat I've got in. Okay, so interestingly I've gone through my box of bits and found a GTS 108, yep, which has come from Rimmers, and this is an 88-degree thermostat as opposed to the 82-degree thermostat which I've just taken out of the car, which was a GTS 104. So I'm going to put this 88-degree thermostat in the car and see what effect that has on the gauge, see if it gets it to the middle, because I'm interested, because the 104 is positioned as a summer thermostat and the 108 is positioned as a winter thermostat, and living in the UK we seem to have winter for 9 months of the year, so I'm actually quite happy to leave this one in. So let's get that fitted, see what happens. That's all fitted then. I've probably lost a little bit of water, but I can top that up once we're running. That's the engine running now up to temperature. Got hot water coming through the pipe, so we know the thermostat has opened. And would you look at that, the gauge is running absolutely smack bang in the middle, exactly where I want it and where my OCD is going to be very, very happy. So the conclusion then, the 82 degree thermostat means the temperature gauge is likely to run somewhere between the quarter and the halfway mark. 88 degree thermostat, then you can expect the needle to be absolutely smack bang in the middle. The choice is yours. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thanks for all your comments. See you on the next video.